Welcome to First Alarm Family First. This is episode 11. I'm Jen Herrera alongside Carolyn Acosta.
Hi, guys. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Marleni Rodriguez, the wife of a late BSO officer who tragically took his life in June of this year, of the 2024. Marleni has had a difficult journey, just like myself, dealing with grief. And today we want to share her story and her insight. We'll talk about this experience, how it's shaped her perspective of mental health and the grief process, and what she feels we may need for change in the system. Hi, Marlene.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm very excited to just share my story with everyone.
Yes. So if you want to just start and share a little bit about your husband's life, career before his passing.
Well, my husband, Andrew, he started with BSO in 2007. He was very excited to work with BSO. He's always had this passion for working with his community. So that was his opportunity to actually be able to do that. And I saw always how excited he was to be there. He would never call out from work. It was just, he loved his job. He really did. Um, and I was very happy to see how ecstatic he was to be there. It wasn't until maybe 2020 that I started seeing a major difference in him. And that was a turning point for us. I noticed that in 2020, with the whole Black Lives Matter, he started changing. He started developing anxiety, which he never had prior to that. So I started questioning him and asking him what was going on. And his response was that he didn't feel safe anymore out there in the streets. He felt that he was questioning his choices every time. He he would literally tell me it's my life or the other person's life. I feel like things that we were trained to do, I can no longer do anymore because there's so many cops getting indicted, and I'm afraid I might be one of those. So that's when I started seeing a difference in his behavior. So I took action and I told him, okay, this is not normal. We need to get your help. Let's get a therapist on board. Let's see, maybe you can learn some coping mechanisms to help you with the anxiety, and let's move from there. Went ahead and did that, but during that time period, it was through Zoom. And as we all know, therapy through Zoom is not the same as in person. So he did do the therapy. I did see that it helped him a little, but the damage was already done, I felt at that point. Um, he continued to feel the anxiousness. He started to pick up with the drinking, which that was something that he wasn't doing before. And just things just started snowballing from there. And I remember in 2021, his sister passed away. His two aunts passed away. My brother passed away. So it was a culmination of several things that happened too fast. And he developed depression afterwards. So the depression with the anxiety and then the drinking, all of that together in combination, it was just a recipe for a disaster, unfortunately. And this past year, 2024, was by far the hardest. It was very difficult because when I saw him at his worst was in February of 2024. And that was the first time that I tried to Baker Act him. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional.
That's okay. That's very hard.
It was the first time that I saw signs of how bad his mental health had declined. And that was the first time that I tried to Baker Act him. They contacted BSO. His superiors knew about it, but all that was offered to him was help with EAP. Later on, after his death, I found out that he was seeing a therapist through EAP. But again, like I said, the damage was already done.
Right.
He was not the same person. I saw it every day. It was not the person that I had married.
So did the doctor
Marleni,
start
sorry.
noticing stuff, or did or did he go himself and seek the help through the
I
doctor?
actually pushed him to go get the help because I saw the severity, the gravity of it. And I told him, you can't do this on your own. You need medical assistance. You need help. This is far beyond your control. And in order for you to to get where you need to be, or at least anywhere near where you need to be, you need someone else to help you. And that's through the supervision of someone that knows what's happening with you.
Mhm.
I know that you guys had those conversations. You mentioned that you found out after his passing that he had been speaking to somebody, and we hear this often. So you didn't know that he was actually seeing a therapist?
I didn't know who the therapist was. He did say he was seeing the therapist, but I found out who the therapist was. And the reason why I say that is because I questioned if he really was seeing one. And the reason why I questioned it was because I saw his mental health getting worse. And I felt that I was like, if someone is seeing a therapist, they should show some signs of improvement. And I wasn't seeing that. So I continued to question him, but he wouldn't give me information on who he was seeing, where this therapist was. He kept it very to himself. The only thing he would tell me was, it's embarrassing. It's very embarrassing for me to be going through this and I don't want anyone to know. Can you just respect that?
Mhm. Right. And that's very common. I feel like these, specifically these men and women in this career, they don't want to show that weakness. And my husband was the same. I didn't realize he was diagnosed with PTSD since 2015. I had no idea. I know that we all go through our challenges, and I knew that he was seeing a therapist, but I had no idea it was because of this. And he would not disclose that to me. I found out after his passing.
Yeah. I think it's this whole mentality of like, I'm a man.
Mhm.
I can't show signs of weakness. And for them to say I'm seeing a therapist, that's a sign of weakness, for especially Hispanic men. I feel, at least in my culture, and I saw that very much so in my husband. He didn't want anyone to know, and it was a form of embarrassment for him.
Right.
Marleni, why do you feel it's important to have conversations like this one? It cannot be easy, to relive certain things, but why are you sharing?
I'm sharing because I don't want someone else to go through the same thing I'm going through still, or that I went through as well. I think it's important for you to be aware of what resources are available to your spouse, um, and to be able to have that open communication with them and letting them know, hey, it's okay for you to feel this way. You're not the only person that feels this way, and I'm your wife and I'm here to help you. And if we as significant others or wives or husbands can do that for the person that's dealing with something like this, I think it means a lot. And if we are able to get information out there on how to do this appropriately or the best way to approach them, because sometimes we may not be approaching them the best way, that's another plus. And for people to know that, I think is very important.
What do you think, after your husband's passing, now we look at things a little differently. What change do you think needs to happen, within the departments?
Definitely informing the families about the services that are available to them. I didn't even know he had EAP. I had no clue what was available at all. I was in the dark when it came to that. I wish we would have had more information on that. It wasn't towards the end that I found out that he had that available to him.
Hmm.
And I think that's huge. I think there should be a way that if your significant other is going through something, that you can easily contact them and tell them, hey, I know he or she is not disclosing this, but this is what's happening. How can you help me? Or what is there available that I can, use, or that's um, to my advantage in order for me to help them.
When you told us that you had him Baker acted at one point because
Yeah.
it got that serious. Was he angry? Did he understand? That's a really hard call for a loved one to make.
I tried. We didn't even get to get him Baker acted. I called, and the police department down here in Homestead basically were very adamant not to take him in. And of course, he knows what to say. He knows exactly what to say. So um, he spoke to them outside, so that I wasn't present.
Hmm.
And he told them exactly what they wanted to hear. So they came back to me and told me, you know what, it's best maybe if you get in contact with his department, speak to his commander, and take it from there, because this wouldn't be the best way to go about it. It will go on his record. He can lose his job. And that was his biggest fear. So after that moment, he became very aggressive and very upset at me. He was shocked that I even tried to do that, because in his mind, it wasn't that I was helping him. It was more like, oh, you're going to make me lose my job. You're going to make me lose something that I worked so hard for.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest thing in his mind.
And he was fighting so hard for so long to not make that happen, to hide what was happening.
Exactly.
Yeah. For families like yourself and myself, what support have you found?
To be honest, you guys are the first support I've had when it comes to knowing people who have dealt with this situation. Like, of course, I have family, I have friends, and they all say the same thing. You need a support group that has been through it, because they will be the only ones that would really understand you. We can understand you so far
Right.
because we haven't been through what you're going through. But you guys have been the first that I have actually had some type of support and some kind of connection with someone else that has dealt with something similar to what I've been going through.
Yeah. I totally, obviously we're walking the same path. We're walking the same walk, and it's very difficult, but I think community is huge. For me, that's been super helpful. And, I think that more people need to come out and more people need to talk about this, because a lot of them are going through this, and the families as well. And
Yeah.
that's what Jen and I are trying to work too with the fire department, to have the families connected more and to get more resources available for us to be able to help. Because we're not, when they get their emails and memos and stuff, we have no idea what,
No, we're in.
services are being offered, what conferences are being done. We have no idea,
Yeah,
but I would have been the first one to be there. If I,
exactly. Exactly. I agree. And one thing I was talking to Jen also, when it comes to things like red flags, like if you notice, if their superiors are noticing some red flags, like that should be something that they should get on top of and do more. And one of the examples that I have exactly with my husband was he never called out from work. Never. I would be the one to call out for work if the kids were sick. He would just go to work. And to have someone who was always present to all of a sudden start missing out Fridays, Mondays, and Tuesdays, and it just became a constant thing. Why wasn't something else done? Why wasn't a house call done? Not a phone call, not something like talk to you in person and say, hey, how are you doing? That sometimes doesn't really work because they're not going to disclose, or at least call their wife or significant other. I know that that might be kind of a touchy thing. It might be a little bit crossing boundaries, but I think I would have preferred that. Call me or ask me, hey, is everything okay with your husband?
Mhm.
I think they have a huge community, or they say they do, but I think it's just between them and it's not more extended to the family, which I think it should be.
I think that's a huge point, and I don't know what the rules are, right? But I think you're onto something there. Just like you said, how your husband was able to talk himself out of, right, that Baker Act occasion. They know the system. They know how it works. So sometimes it may be almost crucial to reach out to a family member. But again, who knows what the laws or like the code is, you
Yeah.
know, it's definitely worth looking into. I want to ask Marleni, I know you have two sons.
Yes.
Can you share their ages and how are they right now?
I have an 18-year-old and I have an 11-year-old. The 18-year-old is Aiden. Mason is my youngest. Um, they've been, I feel like the oldest is taking over my husband's shoes, filling in his shoes, which I have to constantly remind him, hey, I see what you're doing. I understand, but you still are a teenager and you still, yeah, a young adult, you can say now, but you still have to play that role that you are supposed to play. I don't want you filling in for your dad all the time because it's not normal. They are both going into therapy, which has helped tremendously. Um, and that's something that I feel like has opened communication a lot between us as a family. And I recommend it because without therapy, I don't think we would be able to discuss a lot of things that we discuss as a family right now. And it's been very hard, very hard. It was very hard also for my oldest. I recently found out, like after 5 months, my husband passed away, that he confided that he didn't feel the same thing that I felt and everyone else felt when Andrew passed away. What he actually felt was relief, he told me. And for me as a mother, that was so painful to hear that my oldest was feeling that way.
But honest, very honest of him to share that with you.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Because I think, at least from my shoes, when Alex and Alexander would butt heads towards the very end a lot. And I don't know, again, I'm just speaking for someone who's not here. I don't know if maybe he saw, and these are kids being kids, maybe he wanted to control him because he couldn't control himself, like his thoughts. And so he was always trying, no, don't do it like this. So it was always butting heads. And I'd be like, you need to lighten up on him. He's a kid, it's just, so I could see that, Alexander too, like I think he didn't understand why dad was just not happy all the time.
Yeah, it was similar situation with Aiden and Andrew, and I saw that. And at first, I was very worried about the effects of what was going on at home, what was going to happen with my kids, and if it was affecting them drastically. And when he confided in me with that, I was like, yes, it definitely was affecting them. It did have a deep effect on them. So the issues that they have, or the trauma that they develop at work, it definitely transcends into the family. It definitely affects us, believe it or not.
Would you, and Carolyn, you and I have never even had this conversation, having two sons, having two children, period, I guess, would you support them becoming police officers or firefighters or any other sort of first responder, or would you try to push them in a different direction?
Police officer pushed them in a different direction. Firefighter, as a matter of fact, Aiden actually went with one of my good friends who's a captain for one of the Miami-Dade firehouses. And he did a ride along not ride along, well, ride along, yes. He stayed at the fire station with him all day, and he got to go to calls with him. At first, I was very hesitant to even allow him to go. And I said, okay, you know what? If this is something he wants to do, I'm not going to stop him. But definitely police officer. I put my foot down with that one. I would prefer him to look into something else. I don't know. It's just after seeing the trauma and also knowing the statistics, that was another thing. I had no clue about this, which I think I shared with you last time, Jen, that they lose more first responders to suicide than in the line of duty. I had no clue. If I would have known that, I would have told my husband, no, don't even bother. Go into another career, change careers or something. Granted, not that everyone goes through that route. However, that is a huge percentage, the percentage that I read.
Right. And I think more people are starting to talk about it now, that it is eye-opening. Being a wife, I had no idea. I didn't think of it like that. I thought like they picked this career because they could obviously handle this, and not thinking that, nobody can handle seeing these kind of things in and out, being that, being put in these positions where it's life or death. I mean, no one is equipped for that.
Yeah.
And it does eventually put a toll on you.
Yeah. They become hypervigilant. It's something in the level of hypervigilance that they have is nowhere near what a normal person would have. Mm-hmm. So they're constantly with their heart rate up, constantly thinking the next move, or thinking about, okay, if the situation is safe or not. And it's just anywhere, even going to a restaurant, I would notice how he would look for the exits.
Yes.
And where to sit. He would pick particular seats that he felt that were safe enough so that if something did happen, he would have the advantage. Mm-hmm. And those are things that I picked up afterwards and I became more aware of. And I didn't notice that first. Mm-hmm. I was blind to it.
As far as the grieving process, and I think the grieving process looks different for everybody, and that's really important to point out because all of us handle things differently. Marleni, where would you say you are with it right now? Because I have not been in the position that you and Carolyn are in. Thank God. And I admire you guys for how you are handling it. But I imagine it's sadness. There's got to be some anger. Are you past that point yet?
I am past the anger point. I will say that. I did have a lot of anger at first because in my mind, I kept thinking, how selfish of you to do this. Why would you think that this was the best answer? You left us. How am I going to survive now without you? So in my mind, that kept playing. Yeah. And it wasn't after therapy and talking to people and reading books that I finally realized he really had no control over it at that point. It was bigger than him.
Right.
It was too much for him to handle. He was in so much pain. And it made me feel sorry for him more than anything. Because here you have this beautiful human being who I know was capable of so much. Mm-hmm. thinking that this is the only solution that they have to make themselves better or to make things better.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, I go through the same minor waves, so I can be really good for a few days, but then all of a sudden, I'm like, gosh, I'm so upset. I'm so mad at him. Why did he do this to us? Especially now with the holidays that just passed. That was really rough. I know these were your first holidays as well.
Yeah.
Um, so it's an up and down. It's an every day. Like, I don't know how I'm going to feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes people ask me, oh, how are you doing? I'm like, every moment is different because there are moments that I'm fine. I'm smiling. I feel good. And then there are moments that I just start crying out of nowhere. I listen to a song and I start crying, or I drive down a street that I remember something that happened or that we said together and I start crying. So I say more moments than day by day because
Mhm.
that's the reality of it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there something that you miss most about your husband?
Oh, I miss his laughter.
I think that's a beautiful thing to say that you miss, considering the last, you know, times that you had with him. I think that's a beautiful thing to acknowledge
He
of
had
what
a
you.
beautiful smile, a beautiful smile. And he always had a joke. Yeah.
And we hear that, Carolyn. I know the people who we have spoken with, sadly, sometimes the people, and I feel like we say this all the time, but it is what it is. The people who make this choice because they're truly sick were the happiest, most outgoing, light up a room
Yeah.
type of individual.
Right.
Yeah. That's
And
why so many people couldn't believe it. They were like, how? He, he was the life of the party. He would walk into a room and it's just, you felt his presence. And yeah, but deep down inside, he was dying.
yeah.
Yeah,
And I think it gives us, like you said, a little bit more peace knowing that they're not suffering anymore. And they're,
exactly.
because that's got to be awful. And to know that they had everything, because I mean, forget about money. Like I always say, we were fine. We are going to be fine no matter what. We were fine as long as we had each other and we had our health.
Yeah,
Everything was going to be fine. But to know that that didn't matter, like it was just so bad.
exactly.
Marleni, what's your piece of advice for myself, for instance, other first responder spouses, as far as what to be very vigilant with and to look out for?
I would say changes in their behavior. Look out for that. Look out for changes if they're constantly, if they start calling out for work, if they start drawing back and not sharing as much, wanting to just stay in bed. There were so many signs that I started seeing towards the end that I realized afterwards these were all major signs.
Yeah.
And those are things that you should definitely keep an eye on. And if you notice something right away, if you can, contact their superiors, see how you can get help from them. My biggest fear was contacting them because he would tell me, I can lose my job if you tell them what's going on.
Yeah.
And that's where I felt like I was against a wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. I mean, it's one of those things that, this is because he would always tell me too. I mean, which was weird towards the end is like, how am I going to be able to support you if I, go somewhere? How am I? And I'm like, listen, you got to take care of your own health. Like, this is
Yeah.
going to be, why are you worried about that? We're going to be fine.
It's so interesting to hear that you're sharing that because I find similarities in what you're telling me what happened to you
Mhm.
with my situation as well, because my husband would say the same thing. I would tell him, look, if anything, you can leave work, you can go ahead and do a leave of absence, we can get a medical leave of absence. But how am I, the money, how am I going to support you? Da, da, da. And I was like, forget about that. That's not an issue. That is the least of our worries. Your mental health is the most important thing. And for him, it's just, in his mind, it wasn't. It was like his job was the number one thing. And if he lost that, that's it. Everything was gone.
Right. They've worked so hard to be where they're at.
Yeah.
And they actually identify with that. Like
With that.
Alex was the air rescue guy. He was the trauma guy at Ryder. Like that's who he identified with.
Yeah.
And it's sad because it took his life. It
Yeah.
really did.
I don't know if you guys realize how life changing these conversations are for so many other people who may see similar things or hear these have these conversations in their own home. So again, I commend you for having the strength to have these conversations. I'm not just saying that, and also for opening the eyes of first responder spouses, because even if it's not our spouse necessarily, it is a tight knit community to a certain extent, and we are around other police officers and firefighters and first responders oftentimes. So it's just, I don't know, my senses are so much more open, and there's no doubt in my mind that every person who watches this will feel the same way. Marleni, thank you so much for doing this with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. It really has been.
Thank you. We really appreciate you. What we're doing now is highlighting, the importance of mental health in our first responder community. More people need to talk about it because it is happening, and we need to, I think the more people talk about it, the better we can support each other and help others.
Yes.
Yeah. And even if, we talk about certain signs that you guys mentioned again, and even if they didn't hear it the first time, they're going to hear it one of these times. Right. And they're going to pay attention to it. Marleni, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.